So you talk about healing this mother wound by finding your inner mother. So who is your inner mother and how can she help us heal?
Yeah, exactly. The way I like to start talking about the inner mother is to just mention this term, the mother gap, because they go together. So the mother
Okay.
gap is basically just looking at whatever you needed when you were young, that you didn't get. So all of us have some degree of this, right? Because our parents are human and they get to be humans with
Yeah.
flaws and their own challenges, of course. So it's not like blaming our parents at all. Like that, we're not blaming here. It's just really just taking responsibility for whatever we didn't get. And then, and that's in the course I teach, there's a whole section on the mother gap, identifying what you needed, because the real idea here is that whatever we didn't get in this kind of maternal way, like love, attention, affirmation, encouragement, support, mirroring, these are the things that we will project outwards, right? And that we will be looking for. um, and so we can project this need for mothering onto our bosses, our spouses, our kids, even. So the more we can become conscious of it, the more we can cultivate this inner mother, which is really a part of ourselves where we start to show up as a mothering presence for that child in us that needs that holding, that support, that empathy. And so it's kind of a process of inner bonding. And people started talking about this, in the 70s when the idea of the inner child came on the scene. But now even neuroscientists are seeing, even in the brain, that you know um, when we do this kind of inner bonding work, we're creating more pathways in the brain, right? We're
Mm.
not just looping between in these kind of neurocircuits of trauma, like fight, flight, or freeze. We can actually calm. It's almost like you're calming your nervous system
Mhm.
and you're creating more possibilities for yourself in the moment. So it's kind of in two parts. I like to say inner mothering is like an everyday thing where we start to connect with our inner child, and there's lots of ways to do that. But then it also comes in really handy when we're dealing with our triggers, right? So we all get triggered from time to time. And I like to tell people that triggers are opportunities to heal those early places where we felt unheld and unsafe. Um, so inner mothering is basically filling your reservoir of love inside of yourself on a daily basis. And it's a cumulative thing that builds over time with consistency, where you're less likely to feel like super triggered and you're more likely to be able to stay calm and present with yourself. As we go through the process of healing the mother wound, we have compassion for what our mothers could not give us and gratitude for what she could, right?
Mm.
And so there's no blame. It's just like, because at the end of the day, it's really about capacity. People cannot be beyond the level of consciousness that they are. And ultimately, it's not personal. Healing the mother wound is actually ultimately not about our mothers in the end. It's about ourselves and about being able to access our full potential and expand our capacity for love and compassion and creativity and all those wonderful things, right? But we have to be able to revisit the wound. I like to say that, the healing is inside the wound. The wound is really the answer. If we want to unlock how we create suffering for ourselves and others, we have to go to that original place where we were victims, right? Because we were children. And so if we can face that magnitude and grieve, right? There's a grieving that has to happen. Um, then we can move beyond it in a really authentic way that includes compassion and acceptance. But I think too many people, I would love to see our culture mature in this way where we can start to have respect for, because it's very threatening, to be like, oh, I have to go back and look at what I went through. Like, I don't want to
Yeah.
do that. That's
Mhm.
wallowing. That's despair. That's not going to
Mhm.
help me. But actually, we can't move forward if we don't know what we're moving forward from, right? So it becomes
Mhm.
about support and really getting the kind of support where we can be held as we do that deeper work so that we can ultimately move forward in like a really lasting way.
So we have to look back. We have to take those brave steps to look back and see what was that really like? How did I feel?
Yeah.
And, we know that that memory is, uncertain and distorted and all of those different things, but when we can look back with compassion for ourselves and compassion for the suffering of our parents, because nobody acts badly if they're not feeling badly, right? Like,
Yeah. And I think compassion for our parents, authentic, like I'm talking about, because there's a lot of pressure, even from
mm,
psychologists. I see it still, and it just breaks my heart. But there's a lot of people who encourage folks to go right to compassion for their parents.
mm,
Like, and it's like a way of bypassing
mm,
the pain. I think we have to have compassion for ourselves first. We
mm,
have to, that's part of actually growing up, I think, is we have to show up for the little girl or the little boy that we were and say, I'm here for you now. I'm
mm,
sorry that happened to you. Your suffering is legitimate. It's valid. Your feelings all make
mm,
sense. And I'm here
mhm,
for you now. We have to put ourselves first and then work through that. And then I think we get there. We get there with our parents, but we can't rush. The rushing is
mhm,
really a fear. It's like the little child in us that's saying, I don't want to look at how I was powerless back then, because I could get stuck in that powerless place. There's a
mhm,
fear. If I really look, it's just going to take over my life. But it's actually not that way. It's like we actually get our power there, when
mm,
we have the
mhm,
support and we do the deep looking at and grieving of what we went through that wasn't our fault. We have to look at that victimhood place, that powerlessness. Because if we don't, we create powerless feelings in our lives, in our relationships, and in our, so it's like we have to kind of grieve that original powerlessness.
mm.
And then we can show up in our strength, in a true adult place, to look at our parents in a new way. So it's like we have to become that parent to ourselves, like you said, and then we can look at our parents not as children that are terrified still, but as true mature adults.
Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Ianla Van Zant, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.